I'm in Cambridgeshire, in an area known as the Black Fen, where earth and sky merge into immense and dramatic vistas. Once drowned and then drained, this landscape is testament to centuries of human ingenuity against the odds. Well below sea level, fen farmland is now amongst the most agriculturally fertile in Europe. Working the land with the constant threat of flooding is problematic, but for native fenmen like George Munns, they take it all in their stride. On the farm where he's lived all his life, George is accustomed to hard graft to reap the rewards.
These all end up in the chip shops.
Really?
Yeah, these all go for chipping. We keep 1,200 Christmas geese as well, which go throughout Cambridgeshire and some of the other eastern counties as well, oven ready at Christmas time. We produce cold-pressed rapeseed oil, which goes across the whole of the UK to about 300 outlets now. But so yeah, we keep ourselves busy, and there is a big cross-section of commodity going away from the farm. That's the first time you've done this then, Chris?
It is, actually.
Yeah, well, there you go.
When you're doing it in a garden, it's slightly more genteel.
Let's
slinging them around.
Yeah, there's nothing genteel about us down here, I tell you. My father was farming here since 1959. He won £100 on the pools and he started farm up, and met my mother in Suffolk, who was in the Land Army, and they got together and got married, lived up in the council house up in Chatteris, and then took on a holding in 1959. There was 21 acres and a farmhouse that stands the other side of our hedge there, which mother said that she could see the stars through the bedroom walls when she got there, and she wondered what the hell she'd let herself into. And it was in such a poor way. The farm was badly run down. Nobody else really wanted to take it on, and he took it. He cleaned it up and made it into quite an efficient farm, really. And when he retired, he retired, and there was about 150 acres here, so that's what I started off with.
From an early age, watching his father at work in the fields, George hoped he'd follow in his dad's footsteps.
A very happy childhood. Yeah, I spent all the time I could here. You know, I never wanted to move away. I never really wanted to do anything else. Mum and Dad both tried to encourage me to do other things, but I always ended up coming back to the farm and having the best time here. I told my wife I started work when I was 4. Father made me a little hoe that I could actually use out in the fields, and that's what I've done. I feel very honoured to be brought up in this area, and it is probably the food basket of the UK, and it's one of the most managed agricultural areas in the world. We are all below sea level here. We rely on pumps to pump water out. But the problem is in the summertime, then we are in the driest area in terms of rainfall, probably in the UK. We need the diking system and the drainage system then to be in reverse to provide us with irrigation waters as well.
First attempts to drain the fens were in prehistoric times, but it wasn't until the 17th century, when investors lured by the promise of great profits, that widespread altering of the landscape began. Resentment grew, however, among suspicious fenmen when a Dutchman, Cornelius Vermuyden, was hired to engineer the drainage. But even the most die-hard countrymen couldn't predict what lay ahead for this interference with nature.
This landscape gives us a hint of perhaps what the fens looked like before they were drained. Large bodies of open water, meandering streams and, well, effectively swampland. And the drainage concept was to convert all of this into this. Absolutely straight drainage channels. And that straightness and the depth of the channel increased the efficiency of the drainage, which meant water was extracted quickly straight out to sea. But there was a problem, and that's as soon as you start to drain the land, you end up with watercourses higher than the land, and that is exacerbated with the fact that the soil contains so much peat. The peat shrank when it was drying out, and that means that you end up with the original watercourse higher than the drain, which is tens of feet higher than the fields you've just drained. And you don't have to be a genius to work out. That means if your river and drain is higher than your field, you're prone to flooding.
That's exactly what happened, year after year. And just when it was beginning to look like the venture had been a monumental failure, the windmill arrived to turn machines capable of sucking water from the swamp. But it was with the invention of the steam engine, powerful enough to pump the land dry all year round, that the viability of the Fens could be fulfilled. Scores of new dikes were built, which provided the bedrock for today's agricultural prosperity. It's very easy to think of soil as being just, well, soil, but the reality is that this is the very foundation on which George's farm is based. This soil, with its centuries of history, is the reason that this area is so productive. It's dark because of the generations of organic matter from leaf fall in the fens before they were drained, falling into the ground, rotting down and enriching the soil profile. And that makes this such a valuable commodity. It's why the Fens are such an important growing region. It seems ironic, though, that in an area so vulnerable to flooding, today's issues of climate change present even greater problems.
Most years we have irrigation restrictions because there just isn't enough water in the system and crops are suffering, and you have to sit and watch crops die because of the irrigation restrictions. Because of that, 2 years ago we took a decision to build an irrigation reservoir so we can now extract water in the winter time when there's plenty of water in the system. But this reservoir is one of the first ones in the country to be built in such a way, because this is really designed to be able to supply water to our neighbours. You know, we've got 7 farmers that are licensed to be able to take water from this reservoir.
Have you had any trouble with the reservoir?
No. I'll say we only used it a little bit last year. We had irrigation restrictions for 7 or 8 years before we had the reservoir, but as soon as I put the reservoir in, then it seems to be plenty of rain.
That's a normal occurrence, isn't it?
Oh, well, there you go.
The reservoir holds about 18 million gallons. There's 7 farmers that won't have irrigation restrictions again in the area because of the reservoir we built.
George's Fenland forefathers would have been proud of his resourcefulness. Similar ingenuity in the past is evident throughout this watery world. George takes me to one of the many pumping stations in the area to see for myself how this artificial landscape is managed and monitored every day, round the clock.
100,000 gallons a minute.
You can see the bubbles and rubbish coming to the surface. That's just the sheer volume of water that's being pulled along.
That's dragging that from the bottom, you see. It's been fairly still for quite a while. Obviously stirring the bottom up now. You mustn't really pump too much in one go, because obviously it takes all the oxygen out of the water and it kills the fish.
Yeah.
What that's doing is actually dragging the water down. This is 7 miles long, and it's just basically taking it from here and putting it over the other side into the other level, which will naturally sort of like drain away. This is a typical Fenland drain. Just in this area, in this district, there's 74 miles of district drains.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's quite a lot, really.
I mean, I'm staggered by the amount of water that's not only getting into here, but also the amount of water which is being used, the reason that you need to keep it to irrigate. So these drains are actually the low point in the Fens. This is the point into which all of the water drains out of the field. The fields are already below sea level. This is lower than the fields, and now what you're trying to do is pump this water uphill to get it out into the sea at the other end.
I mean, if basically it wasn't for these pumps here working, within probably a few months of heavy rainfall, the whole fen would be underwater. That is how critical this is.
So who's the man that's responsible for looking after these drains, bearing in mind that the entire Fenland will flood if it goes wrong?
I'm afraid that all boils down to me.
So not any pressure at all then, Bob? No pressure?
No pressure at all. I try to get it to this level by at least April, by the end of April, when all the wildlife basically is pairing up. The ducks are nesting in the reeds and one thing and another. I mean, if they start nesting now and the water starts to rise, I mean, obviously they're going to be floating. If you drop it too much, they're going to be stranded. So I try to keep an happy medium and get it to this level by at least this time of year.
So you're trying to satisfy the needs not only of the farmers like George to provide sufficient irrigation, but you're also stopping the villages and local villages and towns flooding. And then as a third issue, you're trying to keep the wildlife happy as well.
Well, yeah, I'll try to keep the wildlife happy foremost anyway. That's a bit of a passion.
So you're old softy at heart, are you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
It goes to show that the legacy, hard-nosed fenmen have had to contend with has made them more respectful of nature. George wins many conservation accolades and has even turned part of his farm back to a traditional fen.
We didn't do those things to try and be heroes or anything, but I'd done them because I believe that's what we should do. When I was like 10, I used to walk about these fields and go birds' nests and take pictures of them and stuff. They're just not the same as it was then, and not the variety of wildlife about them, so I decided that it was about time we redressed that balance. Farming's in my blood because that's all I've ever known. But farming's not just farming, there's everything involved. In one day you can be an economist, you can be an agricultural engineer, you can be a water engineer, and you can be a farmer, or you can be just tired.